Good morning. Welcome to the live show. Just going to get everything all copacetic here. I'm now interacting as Adam Quiney. I want to interact as Adam regular Quiney. Oh, good. And it's showing live. Everything's running just the way I want it to. Has anyone else noticed that lives seem choppier lately? We paid for really good fiber optic in our house, and it hasn't, well, it's made our Zoom calls really good, but then on live streams to Facebook, people often report that they get a stream has been interrupted. Stream has started, stream has been interrupted again, which we find really annoying. So I'm curious if anyone else has had that problem, and or if it's just me. Anyhow, that's there. Oh, hello, Sandy. Happy New Year to you as well. It took me a sec to realize, like, to figure out what HNY meant. I was like, does that mean where she's from? No. Happy New Year. How do I say your last name? Figura? Do I have that right? Sandy Figura? Oh, that's a cool last name, anyhow. I see it's stuttering over here, which is annoying for live streams. I don't know how to fix that. I'm not sure what we need to do to change it. I don't know that that's just on my end. I think people have been having that everywhere, so I'm not sure what to do about that right now. We're back from the holidays. This is the first week back. So I took all of December off, starting December 1st. Oh, the UK. That's a classic United Kingdom name, Fgura. My dad is from the UK. He's from Birmingham. Actually, he's from Tamworth, which is, I often think of it as near Birmingham, but that's because I'm Canadian, where 100 kilometers is a very short distance, whereas in the UK, 100 kilometers, you're in a whole different country, speak different languages, can't understand a word they're saying. So it's funny because for a while I was playing the latest Assassin's Creed, which is a video game, and the premise, the setting for this game is that you're Vikings coming from Iceland, I assume, or somewhere in Scandinavia, to England to set up a kind of a foothold to conquer England, blah, blah, blah. And there's one act in this game where you're taking over Tamworth, and the characters, the fellow Vikings you keep talking to, just keep talking about what a shithole Tamworth is. And I got to tell you, I did not let my dad hear the end of that. I've been asking him about that. Dad, what do you think it is that led to the Vikings feeling like Tamworth was such a shithole? And how do you feel this reflects upon you as a Tamwegian? Anyhow, yeah, not far from Birmingham. That's what I said. But my dad tore a strip off me when I suggested they were even anywhere close to each other. So, mm. The holidays have been good. Um, One of the things that I noticed happened over the holidays was I started to feel kind of drunk. And what I mean by drunk is not necessarily alcohol. In fact, I've not been drinking for the last, I don't know, something like 3 months or so. I've not smoked pot for many, many years at this point. So it's not necessarily a substance-based drunk, but this experience of being drunk. In ACOA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics, and there's a sort of byline there, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. For a while, one of my friends who was in transformational work with me was like, you might check it out, Adam, just to see if you can relate to the experience. It might give you something. And I was intent on doing work around spirituality and sobriety at that point in my life. It's an ongoing thing for me. And one of the things I really took away from that program was this notion of emotional sobriety. How emotionally sober do I feel, regardless of anything else? And the idea of that is that children raised in alcoholic families have parents who are alcoholic, and consequently, there's very little consistency. And what tends to happen is that people can get hijacked by their emotions. So it's not that the children are drunk. In fact, they often become very staunchly opposed to drinking. They're very clear of the consequences of that. But they get drunk in other ways. And one of those ways is emotions. They get swept up in drama, sadness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things I've noticed from that work, and then the work I do as a coach and as a leader, is that all of us have ways that we get drunk. And so the way this showed up for me this holiday was I noticed myself spending a lot of money. Bay and I both have spending money accounts. So whenever we create a win, we usually get some spending money into our account. And I tend generally not to, there's not a lot that I kind of long for or want. I just don't tend to spend a lot of it. I like to buy clothes now and then, but then, once we're in a pandemic, there's not that much to go out to. So I sort of get to the point where I'm like, okay, I got the clothes. What else am I going to buy? And I noticed that over this pandemic, I was spending lots and lots of money, buying lots of stuff, not stuff that I necessarily wanted, just stuff, lots of stuff. You can see sort of in the background here, this box, and over here, I'm going to talk about these. These are Magic the Gathering cards. So I bought a lot of Magic the Gathering cards, which I do enjoy, but the drunkenness of it was that I noticed I was just buying stuff, cards, clothes, whatever, for the sake of buying stuff. There is this sort of feeling like, this gives me a sense of something, sense of inspiration, of excitement, of just feeling like something's happening, instead of being with whatever was underneath there for me to feel. And that tends to be the way that drunkenness works. We drink alcohol, we get stoned, we numb out on TV for 8 hours a day, we binge watch stuff. Whatever your form of getting drunk is, it could even be overworking, it could be overexercise, it could get really fixated on your eating. All of that stuff are forms of drunkenness. And so I just noticing, there's like this experience I have of myself right now that is drunk. And so what I've been doing with that is bringing as much love as I can to it, rather than judging myself, making myself wrong for it. Because what happens when we make ourselves wrong for that kind of experience is we villainize ourselves for the way we're showing up, and that has us push the whole thing down below the surface, and we fixate on the act of getting drunk. So I'm spending too much, I should stop doing that. I'm drinking too much, I should stop doing that because it's bad for me. I'm eating too much, and I know that's harmful, and I should stop eating so much sugar, and that's wrong. And so then we shove that down, we try to nullify it. And what that does is it stops us from getting access to the gift of our drunkenness, our compulsions, which is to sort of like to go into it, to go deeper, to ask ourselves, hey, I'm really numbing myself a lot right now. What's going on? What am I trying not to feel? What am I trying to get away from experiencing in this moment? What am I trying to alleviate in my being? What is it that I can't be with that's going on in life right now? So as I sat with this from time to time, sometimes I was simply unwilling to sit with it. Sometimes I was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to spend more money. I'm just going to eat another sugar cookie. I don't want to think about this. And other times I would sit and think about it. And often what I felt was loneliness. During this pandemic, I felt quite lonely. I'd feel a sense of powerlessness at times. I felt fear and anxiety about an upcoming trip, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And I felt like in my relationship with my wife, I felt like less connection than I wanted. And so all of these things are great reasons for me to then go and spend a bunch of money, because it gives me a sense of like, ooh, excitement, novelty, something new. Fill me, let me feel alive, as opposed to feeling crappy and bad about these things that are hard for me to be with. So that's a little bit of what sort of came up through the holidays. Other than that, they're really relaxing, really nice. The trip that we've got coming up, I'll just share a few more bits and then we're going to get into some of our topics. On Monday, we leave the country, and we've got someone staying here at the house, and we'll be off to Costa Rica, which people are often like, ooh, nice, Costa Rica, which is true. Costa Rica is beautiful and the people are delightful, although I find that with every place I travel, the people are delightful. That's a good thing. And what we're going to be doing is spending the next 2 weeks on retreat for the Forge. So the Forge is the program we run, the group program. And as a gift, when people sign up, they get the whole package of the Forge, and then there's a gift included, which is a retreat. And they have to pay to get themselves there, and they have to pay for any food we eat out, but everything else is covered. Board, room, the meals we eat on site, it's all covered. The stuff we'll do as a group. And we'll be diving in, doing some deep work together, which is going to be amazing. The anxiety and the fear around that is just that the timing couldn't be worse. We've got Omicron surging right now. probably seems like the worst time to travel to me, and yet here we are, heading off into the unknown, traveling, taking this on. If we had found out about this, if Omicron had kind of risen to a head or even made itself known 2 months earlier, I think what we would have done would have been canceled. We would have postponed yet another year, which we did last year. But this all came up 3 weeks before we left. And so we really sat down, we took a look, we really thought about it and decided, okay, we're gonna go for it. And so we're clear on our commitment. We've looked at like, hey, what all are the things we're doing? Great, here's the choice, and now we're in the act of empowering our choice. So what we could be doing is we could have made that choice, and then we could be like, should we cancel? Should we go? Should we cancel? Should we go? And hem and hawed. So that would be an example of making a decision, making a choice, but not actually empowering it. You just make the choice, but don't empower the choice you've made, and that's a crappy feeling. We go bounce back and forth. Should I have made this choice? Is the right choice? The way that we move our lives forward is we make a choice and then we empower the choice. It doesn't mean that we just feel automatically awesome. We don't. We feel scared. We're nervous. What is it going to be like traveling? What are the airports going to be like? All of that sort of stuff. The way we empower our choice from here is, okay, got it. This is the choice we've made. What risks does that expose us to? How do we mitigate those risks? What do we do? How do we want to show up? Okay, this is the choice. We're going to be bringing a bunch of people here from all over the world to come into a beautiful place and do some work with us. What does that expose us to? What do we have to do to address that as far as our choice is concerned? So the fear and anxiety is a natural function of that. It's not wrong. It's not right. It's just what is. And our work is to practice being with that and allow it to sit. Daniel, I see you say I'm guilty of having avoidance issues as well. I would say you're not guilty. I mean, I'm sort of jumping on your language. I wouldn't say you're guilty of it. I'd say you're a human. I have yet to meet a human who doesn't have some form of getting drunk, so to speak, who doesn't have some form of numbing ourselves from all of the infinite of what there is to be with in life. Like if you really pause and you sit and you take in, you kind of consider how much there is for us to be with as a human being. By be with, I mean be like undefended, be open and just receive. It is mind-boggling. You know, there's love and weddings and marriages and children being born. And then there's children being pressed into killing their own parents and people being hunted like prey in parts of Africa. And then there's like, you know, the what's the right word? Like the imperialist corporations that are enforcing a system that keeps that going, and there's residential schools and all of that, and like there's just so much. There's so much, and as a human, to stay open and to be receptive and to receive all of that is really, really, really challenging. And so it would be weird if we as humans didn't have ways of not having to be with all of that, of ways of dissociating from it, ways of kind of unplugging, ways of giving ourselves a break from all of what there is to be with. You know, back when we were cavemen, there was less to be with. It was more immediate, but like less. We have more input into the system. So we have consequently more ways that we've evolved to numb ourselves from it. The challenge, I think, of this stuff, well, there's many challenges, but one of the challenges that makes it hard for us to see our own stuff as it shows up and to do the work on it and to be empathetic with other people is that my way of numbing myself looks different than your way of numbing yourself. I might get drunk. You might go shop. Bay likes to shop for shoes, to buy stuff like that. I like to drink, or what else do I like to do? I like to bury my head in video games, get really obsessive about becoming the best at some video game that I'm playing. And what these differences allow us to do is they allow us to get caught up in that my thing doesn't look like your thing, and your thing is the wrong thing. So I can judge the person who's doing heroin, or I can judge the person who's an alcoholic. And then I can go over here and spend 16 hours a day working at my desk because that's my way of numbing myself. And what that does is it lets me put my attention on what you're doing wrong rather than taking a look to see how I am actually the same way. It lets me off the hook, and it makes it harder for me to see my stuff because instead I get to rest kind of comfortably in the idea that, well, at least I'm not doing that. At least I'm not doing that is the sound of the abdication of leadership. Well, I might be doing this, but at least I'm not doing that. That's a way that we get to sort of put on blinkers. I might not be perfect, but I'm not as bad as that guy. It doesn't matter what that guy's doing. That guy has his own work. It's none of your business what that person's work is. What are you doing that there's to take on? Turn your eyesight back here. So, thanks for sharing that, Daniel. Thanks for the grace letting me speak to it. I talked about magic, so I'm going to share a little briefly about it. Magic the Gathering is a card game. This is what the card backs look like. All the cards have this back, and the front looks something like that. It's got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to tell you about in one moment. So Magic the Gathering is a card game that was invented. It was created or published first in 1993, and it was published in Seattle, which is literally just, across the border from where I live, very close to Victoria. And so this game came out, and my friends and I started playing it at a very young age. We all started around 94 when it first came out. So we've been playing this thing forever. And what Magic is it's called a collectible card game, which has two components. The first is all of these, there's millions and millions of different cards, and each card represents a spell that you can cast. So first of all, you're playing as wizards. You get to be a wizard, you get to cast spells, and you're trying to defeat the other wizards at the table. That's fucking sweet. As a starting point, that's amazing. Happy New Year, Andrew. What could be cooler than getting to pretend that you're a wizard and defeating other wizards? As far as I'm concerned, that's as good as it gets. So that's the first part. Really fun way of doing that. And what you do as you progress through this game, first of all, is you have to buy these cards. They're not free. You have to open packs of cards or go to a store and buy singles. Happy New Year, Carol. Nice to see you. And then you create a deck. So a deck of cards consists of all the spells that you're putting in your satchel to go to this wizardly battle. I'm going to come to your question in a sec, Daniel. That's a really good question. So there's millions and millions of spells to choose from. I'm going to choose about 40 spells that I think will work together well. And then I'm going to go and battle with my friend. And the way that the game progresses is your deck, your satchel of spells, consists of two kind of things primarily. The first is it consists of what are called lands. Lands look like this. So that's a mountain. Here we've got a swamp. There you go, swamp. Here we've got an island. There's 5 types of lands. Here we've got a forest, that's green mana. And lastly, we've got a plains. That gives you white mana. That mana symbol tells you what color of mana. Someone's calling me. Well, I'm just going to not take that call. We're talking about magic here, buddy. So every turn you can put one land into play, and then you can use that land every turn. Hey, America. I'm just nerding out here, but then we're going to come back to the good stuff. So hang in there. If you guys are like, what is this nerdy stuff we're talking about? This is important because it's fun to me. So I'm going to show you 2 spells. Each turn you can play one land, and you get to use that land every turn. So what this does is every turn you build more and more resources. The first turn I'm going to have only one of these in play, so I can only cast 1 mana worth of spell. But next turn I'll play my second land, and now I have 2 mana available to me. I've got the white mana and the green mana, the plains and the forest. So I can cast something that costs 2. And what that allows is this spell, for example, you can see this number up here in the corner says 3. You see that? It's just a number 3, and that tells us this spell requires 3 mana, and it doesn't matter what color that mana is. So as long as I've got 3 lands in play, I can use them to cast this spell. This spell has a different cost at the top. It's got a 1, so it means 1 mana, doesn't matter what the color is, and then it has a white mana, a black mana, and a red mana. And so I need to make sure that I've played out the appropriate lands so I can effectively cast this spell. So I'm not going to go too much more into this. It's an amazing game. It's incredibly complex, or at least it can be. It doesn't have to be, because you get to build your deck. You can make your deck very simple. But for someone like myself who loves rules, loves complexity, loves deep strategy and strategic thinking, Magic the Gathering, I think, is one of the greatest games ever created. The interesting thing about this game and this intellectual property is the game is phenomenal, and the company that make it, the company that produce it, publish new cards, they're called Wizards of the Coast, and they could not fumble the ball, metaphorically speaking, more. It's impossible for them to do a worse job in terms of marketing, rewarding people playing the game, all of that. They constantly fumble and fuck up. The game is so good that people continue to play it. We kind of play the game in spite of how terribly run this company seems to be and how out of touch they seem to be with the player base because the game is so phenomenal. I'm going to show you a couple last things. First, Andrew says, what's my favorite card in Magic and what's my favorite color? My favorite color is probably either black or blue. Blue is the color of manipulation. Blue is the intellectual wizard, sort of imagine the wizard in the ivory tower. So I really like that. Blue does stuff with time. Your opponent can cast a spell, and with a blue wizard can be like, nope, that spell's going to actually target this person over here. So you can like redirect stuff. And black is sort of like evil kind of magic. It's the magic of sacrifice. Hello, Grimby. The magic of sacrifice. It's the magic of draining your life to get more power. It's the magic of necromancy and zombies and stuff like that. So those are the colors I like. There's too many cards that I love. I don't have any one favorite, but I'll show you guys this card. This card's called, you can just see it there, Black Lotus. It's in this case. This is the most expensive card in Magic the Gathering. And if you're curious, I'm not going to share the price because that feels a bit gauche, but if you're curious, go on eBay, Black Lotus Magic the Gathering, to see what that card's worth. And the reason it's worth so much is because the nature of these cards is they do two things. One, you can play with them when they're fun, but two, you can play this game competitively. The better a card is, the more it's worth because people want it, and there's only so many of a given card available. So it's not like a pair of sneakers where people want it solely to own it. Like most collectibles like Beanie Babies, certain Beanie Babies are worth a lot of money because they're rare, but once you have it, all you can do is, showcase it in your collection. You can't do anything with the Beanie Baby. It doesn't allow you to do anything different other than have a Beanie Baby there that you know is worth an amount of money. The Black Lotus, one, is a very rare card. There wasn't very many made before they stopped printing this particular card, and they'd never reprinted it. Second, it's a card that every single deck in the entire game would be made better if it had this card in it. So it's such a powerful card, and it's so rare, you kind of have the combination of two factors. And what that creates is a card worth an exorbitant amount of money. To me, this is worthless, or put differently, it's priceless. I could sell this, but it's not worth it. What this represents is the shrewdness I was as a kid in trading with people and managing to part them with their cards that were worth a lot of money in exchange for stuff I had. And I was a kid. I was a little 15-year-old. I didn't have access to money or anything like that, but I was very shrewd as a trader. And so that card sits here in pride of place in my office as sort of like a gold medal at the Nerd Olympics. Okay, let's come to what you guys have talked. We're going to shift out of talking about nerdy stuff now, and we're going to talk about other nerdy stuff, transformation, coaching, leadership. Before I do that, though, Andrew, you lightly touched on Magic Online. Yeah, that's a great example. Thanks, Mia. I love you too. Andrew, Magic Online is a great example of this company doing such a terrible job of like building the software to support this game, and yet people play it because the game itself is so good. And you were saying you spent a good few years playing Hearthstone as you were a big Warcraft fan back in the day. I liked Hearthstone too. What I didn't like about Hearthstone is ultimately it felt a lot simpler. There's just less strategy available for a variety of reasons I could get into, but I've got a background in playing Hearthstone too. Okay, so Daniel, you're sharing. Daniel asked a question before I got into this. You guys ever get a nail that's like catchy? I have to file it, otherwise I'll go absolutely insane. It's the most annoying thing in the world. So Daniel asks, where do you draw the line between judgment and criticism? The most judgmental people hate to be judged, but how do you encourage change without causing them to be defensive? Okay, that's a really fantastic question, Daniel. Thanks for asking it. So let's let's do some distinguishing here. What is the difference between criticism and judgment? I would assert, I don't actually know the two, so let's do a bit of work here. We're going to first bring up our dictionary. Criticism, meaning definition, and judgment definition. Definito, that's how I always spelled definition. Okay, so criticism, the expression of disapproval of someone or something based on perceived faults or mistakes. So criticism would be the verbal expression of my judgment, typically. Specifically, negative judgment. So judgment can have two different sides. I can judge something good. What do you think about that, Adam? I think it was good. That's a positive judgment. What do you think about that, Adam? I think it sucked. That's a negative judgment. The definition for judgment is, let's see, what do we have here? An opinion or conclusion. They make subjective judgments about children's skills. They also call it the ability to make considered decisions or come to sensible conclusions, an error of judgment. Those are our dictionary definitions. I don't love those, so what we're going to use is, I would assert my judgment is ultimately like an opinion about something, and specifically an opinion that it is either a good thing or a bad thing. So there's sort of like a, I feel this way about that, and that means that thing is good, or I feel this way about that, and that means it's bad. So that's how I would distinguish the line between those two. But I don't think you're really asking what's the difference between those. I think the second part of your question is what you're really curious about, which is like, how do we encourage change in someone without causing them to be defensive? How do I reflect to someone that they're being judgmental or that they're being whatever? And Daniel writes, the most judgmental people hate to be judged. And the most judgmental people will often be like, I hate judging. I would never judge. The caveat worth noting here is that all of us, the thing we put into the world the most tends to be the thing in our blind spot. Yes, I'll let you out of the office, Grimby. You came in. This is on you, buddy. I let you in. There we go. So if I really despise when people are rude in traffic, if you reflect to me that I'm being rude in traffic, I'm going to get defensive. I'm going to qualify it. I'm going to have a bunch of excuses for why that is. I'm going to tell you that I'm not being offensive the way those fuckers are being offensive. It's different with me. Trust me, blah, 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 blah. So it's not just judgmental people. It's anyone. Anytime we reflect something that exists in someone's blind spots, they're going to have a hard time coming to terms with what's being reflected. And more often than not, they're just going to outright reject it. That's how a blind spot works. I can't see the thing you're pointing to. And further, it's not just that I can't see it. I'm actually biased against seeing it. I am going to unconsciously dismiss what you're inviting me to notice. So it's not just how do we encourage change, how do we support change with someone who's judgmental, right? I'm intending to broaden this out. Like, how do we help someone see what they're doing, knowing they're going to be defensive? So this speaks a little bit to why in coaching or leadership, we do a lot of work up front to create a container. When people are new or completely untrained in coaching and leadership, they don't have an appreciation for anything along these lines. They don't really set up containers because setting up a container feels kind of like they're belaboring the point, or the people want them to jump past this stupid thing we're doing to get to the good shit where you tell me about how I really am. Can we just get, oh, yeah, I'm agreement to all this, right? That's just our human tendency. Tell me the shit that I need to hear. And so when someone's not trained or they're new in this game, they have a hard time being really powerful about like, no, we're going to create a really intentional container. And the reason we would do that is so that this person is kind of held while they receive this reflection. Because we know that if I reflect something to you and it's in your blind spot, you're going to have a reaction to that. You can insist to me, no, Adam, I'm here to hear this. No, I really want to know what this is about. Adam, I'm 100% committed, but it doesn't matter. all of the earnestness you have that you are ready to receive this actually works in opposition to you being able to receive it, because it makes you all the less able to recognize and distinguish when you're resistant. When your resistance does show up, you'll be like, no, 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 it's not that I'm resisting you, Adam. I really want to hear this. It's just that I don't think you're really getting it, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. So one of the ways we do is, first and foremost, we set up a really powerful container. Look, I can see the video chugging. It's so annoying. Does anyone else have that with their lives? Does anyone else do lives anymore? So we start by setting up a container. We can do that like, hey, part of our work together is that I'm going to reflect things to you. And part of your job as a human being, just like one of these fleshy machines walking around the world, part of what will predictably happen is you are going to disagree. You are going to be resistant to receiving the feedback, the reflection I have to provide you. Clear on that? Great. And when that shows up, my job is to love you and to point to your resistance so you can start to see it for what it is and then choose past that. Clear on that? So we're doing a lot of laying the planks, setting up this space, this sacred space. And then from there, I want to make sure that I'm not bringing any of my own judgment into the reflection. So Daniel asks, like, how do we reflect? How do we offer something to someone without them getting defensive? Well, one, we already know they're probably going to get defensive because that's the human nature. But part of what I can do over on my side of the fence is I can do my work ahead of time to really make sure that I'm not bringing any of my own judgment onto what I'm reflecting to you. So if I notice that you have a tendency to interrupt all the time, and I have a judgment about that because I'm a human and I don't like being interrupted, there's two ways it can go. In the first way, I'm going to not do my work because I'm operating in the innocent arrogance of thinking I know better. I don't need to do the work. I'm fine. I'm really okay with blah, 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 blah. And so we get in the conversation, you interrupt me and say, hey, I've got a reflection for you. I notice you interrupt me and it's really rude and blah, 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 blah. And what's going to happen is my judgment, it's wrong for people to interrupt, is going to come through my reflection to you. So I'm not a clean, shiny mirror. I'm a clean, shiny mirror with a bit of judgment there. I'm reflecting something to you, but I'm also piling on top of that some of my own, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is annoying. You shouldn't do what you're doing. I'm piling some of that on. Let's shut some stuff down. Andrew says he doesn't have that either. So I'm going to try shutting everything down over here and see if that makes a difference. It can't hurt. We'll close off calendar. We'll definitely close off mail. There we go. Get all that stuff shut. So that's how most reflection happens. As people are reflecting something, they're insistent that they don't have judgment about it. They're wrong. They're just blind to their own judgment. And so the person receiving this reflection, one has their own human defensiveness to contend with, and then they've got the righteous judgment of the person reflecting to them to contend with as well. And so when you receive the energy of what you're doing is wrong, what do? You get defensive. You kind of back up, you backpedal, you put your hands up, you explain why not, you do everything you need to do to make yourself not wrong. Typically when people insist, I don't have judgment, I don't do this, blah, 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 when they insist that, what they are unable to see and consequently unable to do anything about because they can't see it, what they can't see is that maybe in their words they don't convey their judgment, but in their energy they do. So I can use words, I can say like, hey, I notice you've been interrupting me a few times and I just want to reflect that to you. Or I could say it like, hey, I notice you keep interrupting me and I want to reflect that to you. And you can hopefully feel just in that difference, like the energy that gets conveyed, one is sort of like open, and two, the second one is like, yo, fucko, you're interrupting me. Knock it off. You shouldn't be doing that. So that's a lot of what we could go further and further and further into this, Daniel, but that's like a lot of how we work with this is we create a container. We do our own work on our side with our own coaches to move past our own judgment. And then we reflect to someone, offer them what we have, make sure they want what we have. One of the things I always ask people is like, may I reflect something to you? And sometimes people are like, you don't have to ask me. And I tell them, I know I don't have to. I'm asking you with a lot of intention. My intention here is I'm making sure that you yourself are choosing to be a yes to this reflection in this moment, because I think you're going to have some resistance. So when you ask that question, would you like my reflection? You're giving the reins back to the person, and then they get to be fully in control the whole way through. A lot of the times people come up to us and they're like, Adam needs me to tell him this so that he can sort his life out, or I just need to say this so that they stop causing the harm they're causing. That's not trusting me at all. That's not checking in with me. Does Adam want what I have? That's just imposing something on me. When someone imposes something on you, what you do, you bat it away. I don't want this. Fuck that guy. Those are some of the ways that we work. We could go much more deeply into this, Daniel, and we may at another time, but for now, I'm going to leave it at there. Okay, here we go. Good question. Really good question. I really appreciate you bringing that, Daniel. Okay, well, Andrew, you asked about Andrew brought two questions for us today, two topics. The first is, can I speak more about the ontological trap? I'm intrigued by this concept, and I'm still a little fuzzy on what the trap actually is. Exactly, America. Yeah, when we ask that question, prepares the listening. So the ontological trap is a fancy term for what I've written in our description here, which is when doing the work becomes your blind spot. So let's see. Let's do some distinguishing first. Let's get some terms set up. So the first one we're going to talk about is the phenomenology. That's a fancy sounding word. The phenomenology of your life. The phenomenology of your life is all of the circumstances in your life. So that would be like the shirt I'm wearing, the house I'm surrounded by, the work that I go to, where I live, everything that's sort of like the trappings of my life. That's the phenomena, the phenomenology of my life. If I wanted someone to support me phenomenologically, that word is hard for me, phenomenology. I feel like I put an extra n in there. Phenomenologically, I'm just going to roll with it. If I say it fast enough, I'm sure somehow it's going to come out sounding right. So when I want someone to support me phenomenologically, I'm asking them to support me to create new or different or change the phenomena of my life. I'm basically like, help me get more results, help me change the color of clothes I wear. I want to get this kind of job, help me work on my resume so I can get hired at this. All of that is rooted in phenomenological work. Ontological work is all entirely internal, and your experience of your life regardless of the phenomena of it. So if I went and got supported in an ontological way, I would come to my coach and be like, hey, my boss is a dickhead, and this always seems to happen, and I want a different experience of that. My coach is going to start asking me questions like, okay, got it. So what do you make it mean? What's your relationship to the way your boss shows up? And I might be like, well, they interrupt me. And then my coach might ask me like, okay, and when they interrupt you, what meaning do you attach? What do you make it mean that they're interrupting you? Well, I feel like they don't trust me and they think I'm stupid. Okay, got it. Do you know that to be the case? Well, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but no, I've never like asked them. Okay, got it. Would it support you to do that? So notice we're not trying to change the way the boss is showing up in an ontological approach. We're looking at how I'm being about the way my boss is showing up. Ontologically, I'm less concerned with rearranging the circumstances of my life. It becomes a conversation of like, how can I be with my life exactly the way it is? The phenomenological situation is, how do I change my life so that it looks the way I want it to look? Both of these things, these kind of spheres, are important. So you could be someone living in an alley, eating one bowl of rice for your nutrition, and you could do a bunch of ontological work so that you could be totally content with that as your lot in life. So like, I can live in this alley. I don't want for anything more. I'm completely at peace with this. This is as good as it gets. There's nothing different I want. And yet, once you get there, maybe you do want for more. So there's this kind of paradox here where it's like, how can I be completely at peace with what I have and not then just stop trying to create something new? in transformational work, we're looking in both of these spheres. We're looking, how do we support this person to really be the way they want to be and be at peace and with everything life is putting in front of them? And how do we support them to create what's next in their life? So, ontological, internal, my experience of whatever it is I'm doing. Phenomenological, the circumstances and the doing of my life. Most coaching operates in the realm of phenomena. So often you get CEOs who are like really busy, they're exhausted, they're overworked, and what they want to do is they hire someone to help them change phenomenologically. Help me work from a beach 20 hours a week. That's what I want to create. And because most coaches don't have much facility in the ontological realm, they just jump right on board with that. They're like, great, let's figure out how to do that. Who do we need to hire? What do we need to make happen? What do you need to say yes to? What do you need to say no to? What ends up happening is that no work has been done on the CEO's internal experience or way of showing up in their life. Their being hasn't shifted. So whatever it was internally that had them create that particular set of circumstances in their life has not changed. So now they go to the beach and they're spending 20 hours a day working from a beach, but sure enough, there's been no internal state change. And so consequently, what happens is they go crazy, or they start creating drama to give themselves something to spin on, or they do whatever they have to do to fill the same hole inside that working 80 hours a week used to fill. This is why the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, I've heard him do interviews where he says like people don't get it, but what a lot of people take from that book is entirely a phenomenological shift. That's largely what the book advocates for. It does not do a lot of work to look internally, and it does not guide a lot of people to that. People become very fascinated with changing their phenomena in their life. Okay, so hopefully we've got that cleared. Now we can talk about the ontological trap. So as you take on transformational work, which tends to be more ontological than phenomenological, not exclusively, because if all you did was just meditate and be okay with where you are in life, that's fine, but your life kind of stays stagnant. It doesn't really move anywhere. So we're working with both. But often early on, the first thing is like, how do we support this person to be at peace with where they are? And as someone works with a coach and takes on transformation and learns to be able to be with more of life as it's showing up, what starts to happen is they realize, wow, I can be with anything. I could be with someone coming and mugging me and me handing over their wallet. I could be with my boss screaming hot fire at me and abusing me. I can be with that. Ontologically, I can relate to what's happening in such a way that it doesn't leave me feeling upset or taken out. I'm able to be with everything. This is where the ontological trap sets in. So what starts to happen is that we give up on the phenomenological experience of life that we want, which is to say, we give up on things like, I want to work on a beach for 20 hours a week, but I can be okay right here, and so I'm not going to bother going after this thing. The simplest way I can put this is we start to learn I can be with anything. I don't need my life to be arranged in a particular way in order for me to feel content. And then, because we realize we can be with anything, our life becomes about being with everything. So what happens inside this ontological trap is you see people start to end up, it's not inevitable, but like people do things like stay in abusive situations, practicing being with the abuse they're receiving, rather than being like, fuck this. I'm not even though I can be with someone screaming at me, that's not the phenomena that I want in my life. And I'm not willing to let that keep happening in my relationship. That is where we have to create both ontology and phenomenology. Well, that was a tough one. Phenomenology. So we have to put attention on both our being and our doing in situations like that. Yeah, I can live with a mere $20,000 a year. I can make my life work. I can be content that way. And do I want to create more in the world? Am I committed to having a bigger impact? Do I want to make more happen? Do I want to earn more money? Do I want to be able to buy some nice things for me, even though I don't have to? So what the ontological transformation usually creates is it means that we no longer have to do something. As I learn to be okay with, say, here's a good example. Let's say that growing out of childhood, I learned that I'm going to fall behind. That's a fear that kind of got implanted in me. I came by it honestly. My parents didn't do anything wrong. They just taught me the way they were taught. And coming out of childhood, I'm now a man and I've learned, fuck, I'm worried I'm going to fall behind. And from this fear of falling behind, I can't be with situations where I feel like that might become true. And so what I learned to do is in those situations, I work really hard. So I'm super reliable to work 60 hours a week. What happens is I go and because I listened to Adam Quiney and that guy's smart and he told me to go do some ontological work, I go hire an ontological coach and I start working with that coach. And what happens is I start to see that story as like just a story rather than reality. And I feel the fear inherent in the story, but I start to be like, okay, I'm going to roll my shoulders back. I'm going to learn how to be with this. And rather than working like crazy to try to outrun this fear, I'm going to simply let that fear sit in my body and I'm going to metabolize it. I'm going to breathe, I'm going to breathe deeply. I'm going to stop reacting to that fear and just let myself be afraid rather than being afraid and then running off to do something. And so what happens is now I'm like, when that fear shows up, I no longer have to rush and go do a bunch of work to make myself feel safe or okay or secure. I can just sit with it. So now where this person is in life, they no longer have to do anything. They could just sit there. Their fear is no longer forcing them into any kind of action. If they were to just stay there, that's the ontological trap. The next step is now that you no longer have to do something, what will you choose to do? And this requires an entirely new frame of reference and an entirely new way of showing up in someone's life. Because up until this point in their life, what they went after was a function of what would alleviate their fear of falling behind. So they didn't really have to choose anything. It was all chosen for them. And in some ways, this was very soothing because they didn't have to sort of be like, there's no risk of making the wrong decision. It was just like, fuck, my ass is on fire. I need to run to the ocean. And that's what they would do. So there's actually often like a moment of crisis when someone reaches this point where they get very resigned. They get very like, I don't have to do anything. I guess I won't do anything because I can just be okay not having to do something, which is totally fine. But if you want a life that is intentional and a function of your choosing what you make your life mean and be about, that's where we have to step out of what we're calling the ontological trap and actually start to choose something different. Now, that example I gave was a function of like someone's fear about not being enough, working really hard, and then being okay with that, and then going off. But you could fill in those sort of pieces with anything. It could be like someone who's learned to like be really promiscuous in order to not be unlovable, and then blah blah blah, and then they learn they don't need to have sex to be loved, and then they just stop ever having any kind of sex, and they'd be okay with the fact that they never have a romantic partner because they no longer need one. It's like, yeah, but if you could choose something, wouldn't you choose to have a forever partner you could live your life with? Well, I would like that. It's just that I don't really want to. I don't want to go back to that, and that's what has people get trapped. They're afraid of going back to the old way where they were doing stuff out of reactive need or a have to, and so then consequently they stop choosing what's next, and that keeps them trapped. That is the ontological trap. Just spilled some coffee on my desk. Let's fix that. Let's use these microfiber cloths. Oh, it wipes up coffee just as good as it cleans the screen. And then the bonus is next time I clean my iPhone, it'll smell like coffee. That'll be nice. I should probably wash this. That seems smart. Let's see what you guys wrote. Andrew just saying, yeah, funny, my explanation touches on the second question as well. Transactional versus transformational coaching. Yeah, all this stuff kind of rolls together, right? Andrew, you say it makes total sense. I can get out of this bad relationship because if I change, the relationship might change. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if I can escape the phenomena of my life, then things will be different. Well, not if we don't do the internal work. And then, hey, Lydia, Happy New Year. Lydia's saying, I love this. It's exactly where I am. I'm looking for what's next. Often when people start to work with me, especially high performers, Most of the time, their performance has been a function of outrunning fear. That's not a criticism of those people or a flaw in them. That's human. That's what most of our striving as humans comes from to start with. So there's these CEOs, these VPs, these people that are really, really driven. And so at first, what we're doing is supporting them to release their reactivity and to learn how to be okay not driving towards something, just be with something. And then they get to this point, it's like a moment of crisis where they create that breakthrough and they no longer have to run away from something. But then they're kind of like, I don't have anything to work on, Adam. And they experience this period of coaching that's really fucking boring for them because they show up. This is often where they want to quit because they're showing up and they don't have anything to get supported with because they're not choosing anything to take on in their life. They're now at this place where they've let go of the motivation of having your ass on fire, running away from the shark nipping at your heels, mixing metaphors here, but they have not yet created the next way of showing up in their life, which is to choose, to make choices about what's next. What do I choose to be next? And that requires a new kind of courage, because if you're the one choosing what's next, what if you choose the wrong thing? What if you choose something and it's not what you actually want to do and you wasted a year of your life? Ironically, what people do instead of that is they spend the next 10 years wasted trying to figure out the right thing before making a choice. So that's how that tends to go. Good question, Andrew. We'll come back to your second part in a bit. Let's go to what America brought us, and then we'll talk to Sherifat brought something for us today, and then we'll come back to your last thing, Andrew. So, America wrote, let's see, in coaching, I've discovered that advice giving is not coaching. We'll talk more on this in just a sec. I realize that, of course, there may be information I have that the client could benefit from, but for the most part, it's not a whole bunch of teaching and advice giving. I'm still confused about this area because I've heard you, Adam, encourage people to allow people their process and less is more. And I believe I've heard you say whatever is going to help the client move forward in achieving what they want. Just see if she's written anything more. This is all a gray area for me, so I'm not sure if it makes sense. Great. So well, first of all, what America says is exactly right. And this is where people, when you hear someone tell you, oh, my wife or my best friend is like my life coach, or we're like coaches for each other, usually that's because people don't actually, they've not ever really had an experience of a potent coaching conversation where there was no advice giving, there was no telling, there was no suggesting you do this. All there was a space and a powerful stand for someone to step into their own life. And so people generally, by and large, the public's not had much of an experience of that. And so we think coaching someone is like giving them advice, helping them figure it out, because that's the way help looks in the world, right? Coaching is not like the rest of what support looks like. It's its own thing. It is a unique thing. In the practice of law, they use a lot of Latin words. And when a judge is looking at a case and they're like, this case is not analogous to any other cases, it's a brand new thing, they call it sui generis. It is its own thing. So coaching is sui generis. It is not analogous to a friendship. It is not analogous to a marriage. It's not even analogous to therapy. It's similar. It's a little closer to that, but it is its own thing. So what happens when I give advice or when I teach you something, there is an inherent, let's go really far into this. There's an inherent disempowering nature to that. What is inherently disempowering about that is my advice carries with it the idea that you are not able to get there fast enough on your own. You could get there faster if I told you what you should do. Now, I'm not saying advice is bad. So we're not saying that. There's plenty of times where advice is perfectly fine. But just notice that undercurrent in giving advice. Likewise with teaching. It will be faster for you if I tell you or teach you how to do this rather than you learning it on your own. I gave America a little bit of an answer before we got into this here. And think of the metaphor of walking. No one teaches or advises a baby how to walk. what happens is the baby stands up and then falls down. And then they wobble on their feet, and then they go through all of the stuff that babies do. Sometimes they walk a bit and then slam. And you're like, damn, it's a good thing those kids are made of rubber when they're young. They can do that. They have the capacity to learn. And we trust them to learn. We don't trust that we have to like take their feet and move them or be like, try putting your left foot in front of your right foot or any of that stuff. It's actually a real blessing that children learn how to walk before they can cognitively process very much language. I mean, their brains are doing a ton of stuff, but you can't have a cogent conversation with them. It's a huge blessing that that's the case, because otherwise we'd fuck them up completely. We would be like, put your left foot in front of your right foot. And then the kid's like, trying to do all this stuff. So the heart of coaching is like relating to people as babies learning to walk. The essence of this work, the foundational underpinning, is that if you just can get back to trusting your own process and yourself, you will find your path here fastest. What happens when I give you advice, it might even be the best advice in the world, and you might follow it. But what that does is it teaches you that actually the fastest way for you to learn is to seek out someone else's input. And that's what it is, but it becomes problematic because then you stop learning to trust yourself. You stop learning how to discover your own way, and your life becomes about figuring out what do I want and who do I go to have them tell me how to get that. And if you do that enough, eventually you're going to stop even asking what do I want, and you're going to go to other people for advice to have them try to help you figure out what you want. And so most people's lives are the expression of what I'm describing here. Their lives are the expression of seeking something external to help them discover an answer that is ultimately found internally. So when people come to a coach, like when I have people come to me that are, well, in that place we described, right, where they're no longer reacting to their fear, they're trying to figure out what's next. Another common pitfall, trap, place people get stuck in is they're like, I don't know what I want, Adam. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you think it might be? And they're like, well, I don't know, like, can you help me? Yeah, I am. Take some guesses. Let's come up with 5 things you want. They're wanting me to kind of inception something into their brain. They're wanting me to give them some jewel that will bypass the need for them to generate, that will bypass the need for them to start just coming up with stuff. And the hard part is that if you've spent 20, 30, 40 years of your life shutting down what you want, your ability to start to vocalize what you want is going to be atrophied. It's going to be really tough, and it's going to be sloppy, and it's going to feel kind of contrived and made up. Sort of like if you'd never lifted weights and your arms were really floppy and you went to the gym and tried to lift weights, you're going to suck at it and you're going to shake all over the place. And you're like, am I even doing it right? I feel like I'm garbage at this. Only by being willing to continue, I can come and lift the weights for you. I can do that ghost move, Patrick Swayze lifting your weights, be very romantic, but that's not going to help you develop the muscle in lifting weights. The only way we develop that muscle is by being willing to look like a dumbass, or at least that's how I feel when I'm lifting, and lift and practice and be willing to go through that hard process. In doing so, you learn. The muscle builds. And so that's really, that's what's at play here. Advice supersedes that. It cuts that opportunity away from us. Now, the trouble here is that people will immediately push back and they'll go, yeah, but aren't there times when advice is a good thing? Aren't there times when teaching someone is a positive thing? Of course. Otherwise, we'd only have this thing called coaching and we'd never teach anything. The trouble is that our whole world is rooted in advice, teaching, telling, helping, all of that modality that is externally, it's an external input given to me. So the vast majority of the world and your lean and my lean and all of our lean is going to be towards giving you support, towards helping. So it's not that it's not helpful, it's that it's so prevalent, it's so pervasive and ubiquitous, good adjectives, Adam, that we kind of have to, hey Lynn, we kind of have to set aside teaching and giving advice. We have to set that aside completely so we can learn this new thing. It's like if you've spent 40 years mastering a hammer, and then I'm like, great, I want you to start learning a screwdriver. And you're like, okay, but a hammer's good sometimes, so let me hold the hammer and I'll reach for it when I think I need it. Well, the trouble there is you're going to reach for the hammer 99% of the times, even though a screwdriver is the tool for the job 50% of the time, because it's so automatic for you. We just grab it, we reach for it. And so it's not that teaching, advice giving, telling, all of that stuff doesn't have value. It's that if you want to learn mastery in this art of coaching and developing leadership, you have to be willing to set those aside completely for a period of time so you can build this new muscle. The desire to go back to the old muscle makes this new muscle you're developing take longer because you keep flipping over to something that's more comfortable. So that's where we get kind of caught as coaches. Is where coaches get frustrated. They're like, what the fuck? You're telling me not to tell anything, but sometimes that has value. Yes, but we notice that you lean on that crutch constantly. And until we take that away from you completely, you're never really going to get it. It's sort of like, give you another metaphor, training wheels on a bike. And there's this point where the training wheels have to come off for the kid to really learn how to ride a bike. But imagine that the kid's like, well, just leave them on because they only really touch the ground if I'm off balance, and I'll just learn to balance. You and I know that won't happen. As long as those training wheels are on that bike, the kid will never truly learn to balance. It won't happen because he's going to rely on the training wheels. The only real way to do it is to remove them. So that's, America, at the heart of what I would say the reflection I think you're getting is like, it's not that those things don't have a place. There are times when I'll be very clear with my client, hey, it occurs like this moment. What you're looking for is less coaching, more some training, some leadership, and maybe a bit of teaching from me. Do I have that right? Okay, great. Let's do it. But I'm going to be very clear that I'm distinguishing that from coaching so that they're clear that's what they're asking for. Let's see what you guys have written here. This nail is still snaggy. I need a proper file. It's very annoying. Andrew says, the hard part for me in this is that I have a tremendous capacity to follow my intuition. However, I have resources that you've created, Adam, that help me see things a lot clearer. So doesn't that mean I'm technically taking your advice? Sometimes the advice can create tremendous things. Sure. I'm not coaching you, Andrew. I didn't say coaching is the only way ever to do stuff. That would be awkward and weird. Our friendships, again, coaching's not better. It's just its own thing. And like every own thing, every distinct thing, there's a time and place for it. Coaching's a very powerful modality when people want to discover their own power and to learn to trust themselves more. When someone wants to be taught Latin, coaching is a garbage modality for that. Don't coach someone to learn Latin. Learning Latin, the best way to do that is to have a teacher. So Andrew, certainly there's times when I'm teaching you something, or like in the Creating Clients course, that was largely teaching and not a lot of coaching because I was teaching something. I was offering something that was better taught than it was coaching. Teaching, advice giving, and telling are very poor modalities to support people to create ontological breakthroughs. Coaching is the best, bar none, modality, specifically transformational coaching, to support people to create breakthroughs in their lives. It's very hard to teach someone to create a breakthrough because you're going to be trying to convince them and tell them you should do this because of all these reasons. And then what that person's going to do is they're going to do the thing because you convinced them to do it. That is not the same as them discovering their own way into this new way of showing up in their life. So it's not that teaching, advice giving, all of that don't have a place. They absolutely do. It's that, one, we want to be very clear about what we're aiming to create and which modality best serves that. And two, if you're someone trying to learn leadership or coaching, transformational leadership or coaching, you're probably going to have to set down the safety of teaching, advice giving, telling, and all of that for a period of time so you can learn this new thing, unlike any other thing, called coaching. Andrew, you say, if I get stuck on something, I'll seek out other resources to help me understand the thing better. Yeah, so like if we were to look at that from a transformational lens, and I was in a coaching conversation with you, I would be looking for is this Andrew's automatic go seek other resources every time I feel afraid I'm not doing it right? And is there a breakthrough for Andrew to practice trusting himself even though it feels wrong, trusting himself in the face of this fear that he might be wrong. If so, we would probably not give you resources. But for things like, infographics, that's there to help people learn a thing as opposed to coach them towards something. Okay, doesn't look like we have any more comments on that. Nice to have you with us, Lynn. Happy New Year. So if you guys have any questions about any of this as we go, please bring them forward because it makes it so much richer. So let's talk about the being of connection. Sherfat, our friend in Nigeria, asks, can you talk about connection as a quality of being and like its shadows, like distinguish connection as a quality? So this is the heart of who do you think you are? Here's where it is currently. Bam. This is the second round of proofreading this Mamma Jamma. Cover's done. Most of the layout's done. Working on the index. Final round through of proofreading, and then I think we're going to be publishing in about a month. It's very exciting. So we're talking connection, and thank you, Sandy. I'm glad to hear that. Sandy just sharing this has been very insightful. So we're going to talk about the quality of being that is connection. People on this planet, some people have this quality. We all have many, many different qualities of being. One of the qualities I bring to the table is brilliance. You can probably get that hearing. I can distinguish stuff. I can move through altitude. I can be strategic and high-minded, or I can be very tactical and in the nitty-gritty. I like games like Magic the Gathering that have a lot of rules and are very complicated and involve synergies and all of that. That's the quality of brilliance. Another quality I have, and probably some of you have, is the quality of connection. Quality of connection, the essence of it, the gift of it, would be sort of like people with this quality enter in a room and the room suddenly feels more connected. They're natural connectors. They're natural communicators. They're natural networkers. We love to know people. We like to get in deep with people. What makes this person tick? Tell me more about yourself. So that's that quality. Some of the fears that connection has as a quality of being, people with this quality of being, some of the fears they innately have are fears about being awkward, uncomfortable, hard to connect with, disconnected, robotic, aloof. And the reason that someone who is connection would fear that is because it's like the negation. It's almost like an existential cancellation of them, right? If who you are is the energy of connection, of course you would fear being disconnected with people. And so people that are connection really have a hard time being with things like disconnection. Awkwardness, when you're talking to someone and you're making small talk and you can both tell it's like, this conversation's bad. For all of us, that's a bit uncomfortable. For people that are connection, that's death. That is as bad as it gets. It's existentially painful. It's hard for us to sit in that. Consequently, people that are connection have some shadows that get created to mitigate for some of these fears. Some of the things that they'll do is they'll lean on the performance of connection so that they don't have to be with the discomfort of disconnection. So the way this looked in my life was I was so fearful of being a bad conversationalist, awkward, hard to connect with, that in a conversation with someone, if it didn't already naturally right out of the gates have a beautiful flow, if we weren't connected, if there's the hint of disconnection or the hint of fear of disconnection in my body, what would happen is I would get very chatty. I would talk very fast. I would fill every moment of silence with more conversation. There was no silence. There was no opportunity for us to take a breath. There was me talking a bunch at you until you talked because I asked you a question. There's very little of you in the space because I was filling all the space. But at the same time, there's very little of me in the space too, because I wasn't actually being connection, I was performing it. So you could kind of think of this like all of the doing of connection without any of the connection. Share in the chat if you've ever had an experience of this kind of conversation or being with someone like this, where they're very charming, they're very glib, maybe you laugh, maybe they're entertaining, but you're kind of like, I don't really know this person. I don't have a sense of who they are. And when the conversation ends, you're kind of like, oh, that was nice. And then it vanishes into vapor. There's no depth to it. So that's part of how the fear, the shadow of connection can manifest itself. the overperformance of it. That's what we would call the overexpression of connection. It's like connection on connection on connection. Chat, 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 joke, charming story. This is exhausting. The irony of that shadow is that the people doing it, the people who are connection at their heart, are afraid of being disconnected and consequently push out into the performance of connection. There's a couple ironic things from that. The first is they still don't actually get the experience of connection. What they do is they create this artificial semblance of the lack of disconnection. So it's like they are holding down this beach ball called awkward disconnection. And as long as they keep talking and filling every moment of conversation, we never have to be present to the fact that, hey, we're not actually that connected right now. What that ends up creating is two things. One, they don't get what they crave, which is connection. They don't get to be the expression of who they are. Instead, what they get is the effort of ensuring they're not something they're afraid of being. That's very different. Two, they get fucking exhausted. And I can tell you, as someone who has all of what I'm describing, parties used to be so tiring for me, exhausting. Because I'd go out to them and it'd be work. I was working, holding this beach ball down and then holding that beach ball down and then trying to hold this one down. Oh my God, there's 5 people? Oh, this is the worst. How do I manage a group? I know, I take it over, which is what I would do. Not intentionally. I would much rather shut the fuck up, but I couldn't be with the discomfort of disconnection. So they simultaneously are chatting, filling the space, going so quick, and they're exhausted. And so what you see as kind of a compensatory swing of the pendulum in the other direction, over time, these people start to withdraw or take more downtime from parties. I have a friend that was an MC at an event, and he's very much like this. I could feel the energy of it. I was like, oh, I know where you're at. I remember creating these breakthroughs. I got a lot of empathy for this. And I sat down at a big party, hundreds, 400, 500 people here. He was emceeing. And he was eating and by himself, and I sat down. I was like, "Yo, man, what's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, do you want some alone time?" He's like, "Yeah, I'd just like to chill out on my phone." Nothing wrong with that, right? But that is what I'm talking about. For him, connection did not occur like something that filled him up. He was not being connection; he was performing it. The performance of something, as opposed to the just innate, natural, free-flowing being of it, will always be exhausting. So what you kind of see is that these people get confounded by things like a Myers-Briggs typing system that's like you're either extroverted or you're introverted. I call bullshit. People who are connection are introverted and extroverted, not because that's who they are, but because those are the poles of their shadow. So they start talk, if that's where they begin, and then they get more and more exhausted from going to parties. It becomes more and more tiring, and it becomes just preferable. You know what? I'm just going to hang out here. I'm going to do my own thing. I don't get to be with as many people, but at least I can take a breath. At least I don't have to work so hard. And so on the one side, they seem very extroverted. On the other side, they seem very introverted. And then because of the fact that that typing system is really just capturing the shadows which occur at the surface, and that doesn't really capture any of the whole picture, it then gets mixed up into like, oh, you're, what do they call it? Ambiverted. Can we just agree that that distinction's garbage and throw it out rather than like trying to merge in a new part of it? And we don't need that. So that's the nature of connection. The flip side to the shadow is where someone as connection might have learned that being the level of connection they are might be too much. And it could be too much in a number of ways. It could be too much like, wow, when I meet people, I really want to know about them. I really want to open myself up to them. And it's too much. Like sometimes I do that and they punch me. You know, they might punch you literally. They might punch you metaphorically or energetically. Like you might open up to them and the person sort of closes from you and you're like, ah, that hurts. On some level, when we open and another person closes, we experience that energetically as a form of rejection. And so we learn, oh, the connection I am is unsafe. We may learn when I open up to people, sometimes those people are like, a friend, and then hold on to you. And then you spend the next 14 hours of whatever event you're at being this person's only friend. We can learn that way. We can learn that when we open up with people, they are like, whoa, what was too intense. So all of these are ways where we learn, oh, the connection I am innately, we don't distinguish it this way, but the connection I am innately, hey Sarah, Happy New Year. The connection I am innately is too much. That is unsafe, what is natural. And so in those situations, we dim it. We close that connection. We learn around people to be less open than what would naturally be there because we're afraid that our natural selves will be too much. So we dim our light. By the way, we do this stuff for every quality of being we could list. Brilliant people, afraid of being too brilliant and making other people feel dumb, so they turn down their intellect. Radiant people, being afraid that their attractiveness, the radiance they cast is going to have people come down on them and attack them and call them a slut or whatever. And so they turn down their beauty. All of those sort of things. So we do this for every quality of being. We're just looking at connection. So those people who are connection and learn that it's too much become more and more introverted. They learn to turn it down. I'm just not going to go out with people, or I'm going to go to this party because I want to be around people, but I'm going to kind of just find one person, I'll chat with them. And then, of course, when that becomes tiresome, they try to go and connect with other people, but because they haven't done the ontological work to really open up and learn how to be with the connection they are innately, instead of creating an experience of connection when they try to connect with more people, they do the same thing in the other direction. They just layer on the performance of connection. And now they're back to that point where they're being exhausted and blah, blah, blah. And so obviously from here, they conclude, I'm just an introvert. I just don't get energy from talking to people. I find it draining. I can do it very well. It's just not who I am. I'm just an introvert. No, your shadow is an introvert. That's the part of your shadow you've learned to identify with. Or I'm an extrovert. That's probably the part of your shadow that you've learned to identify with. So that's kind of connection. Let's talk briefly about the breakthroughs that are available for people with connection. So in this model I've created and work with, we have the essence, the gift, the light. We've got the fears. We've got the strategies we create to manage those fears. Those are the shadows. And then we've got the obvious fixes. The obvious fixes are, these are the things when you talk to someone, like if you get into a conversation with someone that's interested in hiring you, if you're a coach, or interested in your support, if you're a leader, they'll start by telling you what's not working. And then they'll tell you, I figured it out. I know what I need to do, blah, 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 blah. And their figuring it out is going to be a function of them not having any altitude, because we can't have altitude in our own lives. We're in our own lives. So this would be like someone standing in front of a tree and, hey, Carrie, someone standing in front of I'm guessing baited office hours and they just ended. Am I right in that guess? It's like someone standing in front of a tree being like, I can't move forward. And then they sit there and then they're like, I figured it out. What I need to do is get an axe to chop down the tree. But if you're in a forest, that is foolishness. It's completely not the thing to do. It's just going to move you forward to the next tree and the next tree and the next tree. And your life becomes about cutting down trees. So that's what the obvious fix is. The obvious fix is the thing that when you as coach or leader start to sit with a person and they're like, they have no capacity to just be with it. They're like, fuck, I got to fix this. Let's go off and do it. The obvious fix is they're on the ground, no altitude. This is the thing to do. And what the obvious fix will do is it'll bring them back over to the other side of the shadow. The obvious fix always moves us from one side of the shadow to the other. So it looks like it's creating a new result, but it actually just creates more of the same, just the other end. So for example, okay, so maybe the office hours didn't end. And I'm grateful and glad that you're here, Carrie and Sarah. So the obvious fix for connection, remember that person who is performing connection? Their obvious fix is, I just need to stop going out to parties. I think I just don't get that much energy from people. I can be extroverted, but I just need to honor that I want time for myself. Notice that that obvious fix is entirely phenomenological in how it works. It's entirely based in the circumstances and the doing of the person's life. None of it is, what is it that has me feeling drained? Like, what is it internally? What am I doing that has me feeling drained? And what am I not being with? Now, these are weird questions that you would not get asked by yourself or someone outside of a coaching conversation. My point is, though, that performance extrovert I described, all they're doing is jumping to the other side. So they go all the way to isolating themselves, which is going to be exactly the same result. And likewise, the obvious fix for this introvert is like, man, I feel kind of lonely. I spend all this time in my office. I get to do stuff, but like I really want more people in life. And what they do is they push themselves out to be around more people. But of course, they haven't done any of the internal work to really learn how to be with the fear of their connection, to be with what shows up when they allow themselves to be authentically expressed. They haven't done any of that. So when they go and be with more people, what they will predictably do is perform connection. And the reason they'll do that is because to them on the ground, it looks like a shift. It looks like they're now being more connected, but they haven't changed anything underneath. They're still avoiding connection. They're just performing it. So these obvious fixes are the solution that people believe are breakthroughs, think is going to make the difference, and has them say no to you if you happen to be a coach, because they're like, I figured it out. And then they go here. And they're like, it's not working. And then they go to the other side. And doing this long enough, a couple things happen. One, people get disillusioned by the possibility that anything could be different. They start to be like, man, I have tried to address this so many different times, and it doesn't change. And from their disillusionment, resign sets in. And the way resign sounds like is, I just think I just need to learn to accept that this is the way I am. And then once we resign ourselves, we learn and find ways to become empowered with our resignation. I can be content with just being by myself in my office. Yeah, sure, I feel lonely sometimes, but I'm okay with that. It's not a big deal. And then where that person ends up is empowered by their resignation and stuck. And so at that point, they stop trying to switch and they end up just stuck here or stuck there. I like going out to events. They're exhausting. And I just know that I need to blah, 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 blah. Lydia asks a great question, which is how is this related to intimacy? Let me come back to that, Lydia. I'll just finish up the breakthroughs and then we'll go through what you guys have written. So for people who are connection, myself included, the breakthroughs are usually about being willing to be with that which we are avoiding in service of creating something new. So a breakthrough, of course, is always towards something. It's a breakthrough in connection, but the way that tends to get created is a willingness on our part to be with disconnection. Because if I can be with disconnection, I can stop being engaged in this practice of resisting no connection, of being not disconnection. That is what my life becomes about inside this thing that we've just drawn out. So the way that tends to happen, like the way people practice that for connection, some of the best ones are practice being quiet. Practice counting to 5 or even better, 10 before you open your mouth. When I took this practice on 10 years ago, it was the worst thing in the world. And I would swear, like, if you ever want to learn how to slow time with your mind and you are connection, take this practice on. I would swear, like, societies and civilizations were built and crumbled to dust, and like Ozymandias built his towers, and galaxies were born and galaxies collapsed, all during the span of these 10 seconds, because it felt forever. And what I started to notice was as I sat there, just making eye contact, being with whatever there was to be with in those 10 seconds, eventually the person across me would say the next thing. And I would be like, holy crap, that was easy. I didn't know that could happen. Because I was no longer doing all this work. And so that's often there's so much more to this, but I'm trying to give us some Coles notes or Cliff Notes here in Canada. Is it Cliff Notes? I think it's Cliff Notes in Canada. We have Cliff, America has Coles, or it's vice versa, I can't remember. But trying to give you like some short little pithy bits, that is how connection tends to create the breakthroughs, is letting go of the need to avoid or resist disconnection and instead being willing to be with it. And as we do that, we start to discover some amazing things. A lot of people who are the quality of connection will espouse vociferously how much they hate small talk. I hate small talk. I want to get in with people. Of course you would, because who you are is connection. But small talk there's as much connection available in small talk and awkwardness as there is in the depths of exploring someone's soul. And so if we are willing to really slow down and be with the disconnection, what starts to make itself known, what we start to experience is like, oh, wow, I can create connection with this person in the awkwardness, in the disconnection. And at that point, connection becomes always available rather than circumstantially available when this is the right person who doesn't do small talk, who's engaged with blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. Okay, let's look at what you guys have written here. So Lydia, you sharing, I'm definitely a connector. It shows up as a way to keep people at arm's length. It also shows up as a leader. It's easy to keep people at arm's length. So I think what you're saying, Lydia, is like your ability to chat and chat and chat can keep people at arm's length rather than letting them in. And that can, you can do that in many situations, including as a leader. Do I have that right? Let me know. And then Lydia also asks, how is what we're talking about here related to intimacy? So very close. Intimacy is like really deep connection. The way I love the definition, I first heard this at Accomplishment Coaching, but I've heard this many, many different places since then. Intimacy is in to me, see. So am I willing to let you see me? The performance of connection is a great way for me to not let you see any of me. I'm chatty, I'm glib, I'm charming, I've got funny anecdotes, I'm telling you stories, blah, 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 we're laughing, and then I leave, and you didn't see fuck all. You got to see none of me. Whereas in that moment where I pause and I allow myself to feel uncomfortable, and I'm sitting with you and we're making eye contact, that's intimacy. I don't have to say anything, and there's intimacy created in that moment. Bay and I practice what's called sacred yoga, which is, you could think of it a little bit like tantric intimacy, but that starts to make people think of like weird special sex stuff. What tantric intimacy or sacred yoga is building intimacy from the most fundamental building blocks possible. And so that starts solely with eye contact and our breath. We sit down and practice almost every morning, make eye contact with each other. We have a timer, and then I breathe, and then Bay takes my breath, meaning she like follows it, and then we build intimacy from there, from that level of subtlety. So, and like that becomes about like how much can I see the woman across from me in this moment, and her, because she's adopting the omega pole, we're also creating polarity. So we're not doing the exact same thing. We're creating, just like a battery has two poles, the positive and the negative do different things. I'm holding the alpha pole, she's holding the omega. My attention is on her. How much can I be present to over there? And her attention is on her. How much can I let this man in front of me see me? How much of me can I express solely in the eye contact and in taking his breath? So that level of intimacy can very quickly get shut down when we are chatty, when I am doing all of this work to not be disconnection. This, by the way, most people think that they're creating a breakthrough because they are taking on a practice to not have something happen or to not be a certain way. Oh, I'm talking so much to people, I'm not lonely anymore. That's not a breakthrough. A breakthrough is towards something. Being not lonely is not the same as being connected, as being connection. Being connection might mean being with people and really like feeling their hearts or letting them feel mine or breaking down or breaking up or whatever. Being not lonely, which is a classic thing that people who are connection create, often looks like being like, I can be not lonely. I can be surrounded by people and yet still feel very alone. That was one of the hallmarks of my experience. I was always around people, but I felt very alone. I was not alone, or maybe a better way to put it is like I was not alone, but I felt quite lonely because there was no genuine connection. Lydia, you're saying, I'm not a chatter. I pour my attention into others, but they never really get to know me or get close. Yeah. Do you ever try just sitting quietly? I'm curious if you've practiced with silence. That's such a powerful practice, I think. One of the things that I practiced with for a while, a lot of my early breakthroughs were in connection, because this was just so much a part of who I am and so much a part of who I'd learned to suppress. And so one of the things early on that I'd be practicing was just sharing what was real for me in the moment. So like, if the conversation was awkward, I'd be like, I feel really awkward right now. And it was cool because that let people in. Now, that can be a little awkward, but it was awkward anyhow. So all I was doing was addressing, speaking, putting into the space what was already in the space. Oh, I'm worried you think I'm a dork right now in this moment. And then we get to have a conversation about that. Oh, how come? Oh, I don't know. I'm talking about Magic the Gathering and it's fucking the sweetest thing in the world, but I'm worried you don't like that. Oh, it's actually cool to hear that. Oh, neat. Oh, and then conversation connection can flow naturally from that. So those are good practices too, is to connect with someone to really generously, and it is an act of generosity, simply share what's real for us in this moment. And I also had mishaps. I made messes doing that too. You know, there was a time at a networking event where I shared with someone that what he'd shared with me, I got bored, and he got very, very upset with me, as he had every right to do so. So it's not about not creating a mess. It's not about doing it right. It's about being committed to a practice of moving towards something. In this instance, that practice was connection. I was very committed. I want to create more connection. How do I do that? How do I bring more of that in? Hey, Mara, nice to see you. Okay. We've got one last thing, which is what Andrew brought, his second part. So we'll cover that and then we'll wind down for today. So Andrew says, transactional versus transformational. I've got his thing over here on my other monitor. Let's bring it here. Transactional versus transformational coaching. We may already have touched on this a bit. I'll say I've experienced the how-to or the desire for strategies, structures, etc. to be wrong, to be frowned upon on the path of greater being through transformation. So Andrew's saying in going towards transformation, he's had an experience that wanting strategies, wanting answers, etc. is wrong. He's kind of gotten that training or had that experience. At the same time, Andrew writes, could it be that in certain areas of life, those transactional pieces could be in place at the same time as the transformational? I'd really be interested to hear you speak on the subject. Yeah, so we talked a lot about this, didn't we, Andrew? So it'll be a short answer. Good. Let me come to the topic this way. Good. No, here's how I'll start it. There is a canard in the coaching industry. That canard is this notion of deep coaching. This idea that for coaching to be really powerful and good, it must be deep. And what people then do with that is they're like trying to lobotomize or really excavate someone's brain, or like they get to this place where they're like, I never talk about results with my clients. We only work on being, or conversations like that. That's a disservice because our life is equal parts spirit and human. The experience and the generator of transformation is equal parts being and doing. And so if the only work I ever do is getting into your being and pulling out your brain and excavating and all of that sort of stuff, we're predictably going to step over some of the areas in your life where you may not be in any kind of action. And in fact, all of our conversation about everything going on in your brain might actually allow you to escape the discomfort of having to take the action that is scary for you. And so that's the first thing I'll say, is that like deep coaching is a misnomer. Masterful coaching has the space for all levels of coaching. Just like connection is available at every level of conversation. I can be totally connected with you while you have your eyes closed and you're asleep. I can be totally creating and being connection with you during the middle of small talk. And I can be completely embodying the being of connection with you while we're in the deepest of deep conversations. Likewise, masterful coaching can meet you and work with you and be masterful at every level along the spectrum of like highly transactional, facilitative kind of conversation, all the way down to like getting into the deepest of trauma. I mean, that's more therapy, but like you get the idea, right? Like getting into the deep, deep, deep woods of your psyche. So from that place, the next thing I would say is that like as someone learns this art called transformational coaching and leadership, part of what's happening is they need a framework first. We need scaffolding to begin something. it's kind of like if you want to learn how to dance. Let's say you want to learn how to like, I don't know, contemporary dance. Contemporary dance can be very, my friend Simon, who I used to dance with, described it as the way a child would explore a space, was his description of it. I thought it was very beautiful. So when people see that and they're beginners, they're often like, I just want to do whatever. And like, I want that to be dancing. They're resistant to learning a framework because the framework kind of takes away stuff from them and it imposes a structure on them. And we as humans are like, can be very like, don't tell me what to do. There's a young part of ourselves like, don't take away from my freedom. But we have to learn that structure first so that we can then, on the other side of it, learn when not to bring it. So my hunch, Andrew, about what you're kind of experiencing here is that people are noticing you. I'm making this up, but I imagine people are noticing you have a tendency. Hey, Lindsay, Happy New Year. Nice to see you. People are noticing in you that you have a tendency to reach for the answers, to reach for like the structures or the, what did you call them? The strategies, the things. What's the right way to do this? Give me an answer. Give me a something. And in reaching for that, it gives you some safety. Like, I know I'm on the right path. My hunch is that people are reflecting that to you and inviting you to set that down. Now, some people are going to get attached to that and they're going to be like, you should never have structure. But if we never had any structure, art would not look like art and there wouldn't be expressionist paintings and modern art and postmodern and all of this sort of stuff. There would just be like blobs and, paint hucked at stuff. So my hunch is people are reflecting first that tendency to you, Andrew, and inviting you to step into something beyond your existing range, which would be releasing structures, releasing strategies. Now, that may not be the case. They may be saying that's the case for coaching transformation as a whole. But that's my hunch, first of all, for you, is why you would get that. And then there is a point where, and this might come back to what you'd asked as well, America, sometimes when I'm working with someone, I'm like, I think what would really benefit this person is for me to tell them what I see there is to do. I'm very cautious about that for a few reasons. One is that I know I have a bias to that. My ego, my fears, and the strategies I've adopted to stay safe from my fears, these are all kind of the same thing, right? It's all part and parcel. But all of those are very biased towards me teaching. If I'm teaching, I'm the expert. If I'm teaching, you are receiving what I have to say kind of willingly and a little bit blindly, like you just take it in as gospel. So my ego loves that. It's a very safe place for me to be. So I have to be cautious about that anytime I'm going to offer something like that to my client. I got to really check, hey, am I doing this to alleviate my fears that I'm not making a difference in this call? Am I doing this for me? Or is this genuinely for this person? And once I'm clear on that, then I would let that person know, hey, this isn't coaching, but I've got something for you. Would you like it? At which point then I'll offer it. Notice I'm not putting that in transformational or transactional or whatever. That's what I would say is where we start to get into the realm of mastery, where I don't have to do that. I can distinguish where it's coming from. And I'm clear that it's not necessarily this thing we would call the scaffolding, the line work of coaching. And I'm also trusting my intuition and what's showing up in the moment with the client, that this is what there is to offer because that's what's showing up here. So I hope that's a helpful answer. That's kind of what I've got there. Andrew, you're right. I think what I've seen is that this last year has been so focused on the being that it almost undermines the strategies, structures that can also propel someone forward. So in a sense, I've actually skipped over the strategies or the how-tos of what people want. Might look to projects, Andrew, projects and project design. When clients work with me and in the Forge, everyone has a project because that's the tangible results they want to create. Absent that, it's like, I've used this metaphor before, coaching someone without a project in mind, without a tangible result they're driving towards, is like playing pool or billiards without any holes in the table. So you can smack that, you can break the balls and they make a big racket and they bounce around. It's very satisfying. You feel that momentum through the cue into the ball and you're like, hell yeah. And you're like, stripey ball, and you hit it and it caroms around. But after a while, you start to be like, why are we doing this? I mean, we can certainly keep doing it, but what for? We don't have a goal that we're moving towards. And so that's the power of projects and having things that we want. One last thing I'll say is that often when people start to move into coaching, they start to want to take this on and they approach it beyond dipping their toe in the water. So I'm talking about people that genuinely are willing to, commit to working with their coach, to getting trained, like to doing those parts. When people take that on, there's often a point where, like sort of around where you're actually at, Andrew, but like there's a point where they kind of are confronted a bit. And what they're confronted by is like, I feel kind of like I just like teaching more. So first of all, that's totally fine, but I also want to distinguish that that's a natural place people will get because coaching someone requires a tremendous amount of trust in that person's process. And we think, like you hear me say those words, or you may say them yourself, and it sounds so easy. Yeah, I totally trust this person's process. Every time I want to give advice to this person, that is an example of me not trusting their process. And trusting someone in their process includes letting that person walk right into fire, letting that person walk right off a cliff and fall off the cliff and land on the ground and whine and complain and say, why didn't you save me? All of that is their process. And it includes the empathetic pain and perhaps the guilt and all of your own unresolved stuff that gets driven up when that happens. All of that, you are kind of making like a divine contract to be with it rather than to circumvent it. And that requires a tremendous amount of capacity. Teaching does not require that. Teaching, I can say, don't go there, go here. And then if you're a good pupil, a good student, you will not go there where I know you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to go here. But what that does is it denies you the opportunity of having your heart broken. And you cannot find love if you're not willing and able to develop the capacity to have your heart broken. Your friends, your family, these are people that love you and don't want your heart to be broken. And so they're going to try to protect you from that with advice, suggestions, feedback, et cetera, subtle manipulation. The coach is someone who is so deep in their work that they are willing to have you shatter their heart. It's not really you shattering it, but like that's part of the impact of this. To have our heart shattered and devastated because we trust you that much and we're willing to then go and do our own work to our coach and sob and cry. I've had clients just destroy me. It's not their fault. It's just their process. And I'm loving them and witnessing them. And I don't want to see them have their heart broken, but I also recognize that is the game. So they go and do that. And sometimes they blame me for it, which is human. And then I go to my coach and I like sob, I bawl, I cry, I get frustrated, I'm angry, I swear, I do whatever I do. And then I get supported to move through that. So I can continue to deepen and continue to stand for people this way. And teaching, giving advice, all that stuff, nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't, it allows us to get around that. And so there's this moment of crisis for a lot of people earnest in their desire to be coaches where they are kind of confronted with that. And I've had people go and like, they go and teach for a while, which is fine, right? That's their process. But often they'll go and then they find, it's kind of annoying at them. Like I teach them this thing, but they don't implement it. Or I teach them and it's clear what there's to do, but they don't create the results. And that's usually where the person comes back to coaching because they realize there's just no substitute for people's own process in a lot of this. Lynn, thanks. Lynn's saying, gosh, you're brilliant. Yes, I appreciate that, Lynn. And it is one of my essence words. Thank you so much. I never tire of having someone reflect it to me, though, so thank you. Mara writing, it makes me sad talking to someone who I know is trying hard and performing instead of choosing authenticity. It reminds me of me, and I get aware of how much I long for connection. Yeah, it is sad. One of the places we can really connect with someone there is saying, I feel disconnected from you in this moment, and I'm really wanting to be more connected, and it's making me sad. That's an opportunity to practice something. And really artful work in that regard happens when we make it and we share entirely from our own experience. So we wouldn't share in that situation by saying, I notice you're not sharing very much and you're performing and it's making me sad. That kind of that's making it all about the other person. Instead, I would share like, I notice I'm not feeling as connected with you as I'd like to, and that's making me sad. I'm not putting anything on you. I'm just sharing my experience. That's artful sharing of our experience and feedback. Um, Andrew, you rate one I'm finding as well is trusting people's slow growth. That is the pace they're going at, and it doesn't need to change. That's been a tough one to be with, but I see the opportunity for it in both sides. Yeah, and um, slow is a context, as though there's like slow growth and fast growth, as opposed to just someone's path. And I can point to that for you because I've got that too. Like there's a speed at which people should grow. That's entirely a context. That would be like saying there's a speed at which this flower should grow. It, there's a speed at which my grass should grow. Well, maybe there's probably an average if we went like that, but for any individual piece of nature, its growth is its growth. There's no speed. There's not this flower should have opened yesterday. But with people, we get wacky. We get different about it, and we can't remove ourselves from that objectivity. So, just a context to notice. Right, Andrew, you even say, it sounds like you just saw that. He says, it's funny, I even saw slow growth. Who's to say it's slow? Yeah, it's all just our path. It's all natural. We unfold in this beautiful way. And the more most of my work with my coach these days is in the practice of spirit and spirituality. And the more I'm doing that work, the more I'm able to relate to my own life and the lives of others like flowers. That metaphor is really poignant for me. And like what that gives me is first I had to move a bunch of my own stuff out of the way. But once I've done that, now I can start to I've let go of a lot of things like where's my next client going to come from? Who are the conversations? I don't know. I genuinely have no idea, but I also genuinely at this point with all the work behind me that I've done can completely trust that that's going to work itself out. And if there isn't a next client, then there's probably something else that's there for me to take on. And so this is that part in the breakthroughs for people with brilliance I find is, or my people, this isn't just brilliance, but it's first like head-based brilliance, learning to trust that we are brilliant, learning to own that we are brilliant, learning to own that without needing other people to be dumb or smart, like to release that entirely and just trust, oh, I'm brilliant. And then the next stage is heart-based brilliance, where we start to see the brilliance everywhere in the world, and we start to be willing to let go of needing to know the right answer. We start to trust like, oh, the way I show up in the world is imbued with and imbues the world with brilliance. And then the third stage is like a spirit-based brilliance where it's instead of letting go of needing to know the right answer, it's letting go of knowing entirely and just trusting that as Chogyam Trungpa said, we are falling, we are falling, we are falling. The only thing is there's no ground. So if you understood that, your very human tendency is to like, fuck, I got to grab a hold of something. That's what we do as we're falling. But if you could get that there's no ground, it doesn't mean you're not going to feel like, I'm falling, but you're going to start to like, oh, I'm falling, but there's no ground. So maybe I don't have to clutch so much at stuff. So that's kind of where my work is residing these days. Okay, let's start to wind down there. You guys have been awesome. Thanks everyone for hanging out, chatting. What a great way to start the new year. I am off to Costa Rica next week, so there will be no lives. I don't know, I kind of want to do here's something I'm working on. We do live shows where I coach live. I really want to do a live show where I have two people, one coach, one client, and then we're doing training, we're doing feedback in the moment. So I haven't set that up yet. That's going to require, I'm probably going to get people from the Forge to volunteer to do that if they want to. That requires some real courage. It's one thing to coach live, but then to coach and get feedback on your coaching, whew, that's a whole edge. And, it drives up our need to perform. But I think that there's just tremendous value in that because then we can help people see like all of the bits and bobs of it. And so I'm intending to create that. I just haven't fully committed and made it happen. And I'm looking to see who would be up for that game. The alternative would be that we'd take a recorded call and then I'd do kind of what Bay and I do in the Forge, which is play it live and then I'd jump in and out and be like, okay, here's what I'm no saying. So we may do it that way. We'll see. And I might do a quick live from Costa Rica just to say hi. But either way, I hope you all have an amazing weekend in front of you and stay safe. I love you. We'll talk soon. Bye, y'all.